Ambassador Sarah Chun stood before the assembled Galactic Council, her small human frame dwarfed by beings that towered over her like living mountains. Behind her, Earth's fate hung in the balance. Before her, 17 alien civilizations offered salvation wrapped in chains of gold. The peace treaty that would save humanity from annihilation sat on the crystalline table, waiting for her signature. All she had to do was accept Earth's place as a protected species, a galactic pet, beautiful but harmless, forever dependent on the wisdom of their alien benefactors. The Zephyrian High Chancellor's voice resonated through the chamber like distant thunder. The terms are generous, human. Your species will know peace, prosperity, and protection. Your warriors will tend gardens instead of battlefields. Your scientists will study art instead of weapons. Your children will never know the horror of war. Sarah's fingers trembled as she reached for the signing stylus. Every rational part of her mind screamed that this was Earth's only chance. Behind her, she could feel the weight of 8 billion souls depending on her decision. The alternative was a war against an alliance that could reshape solar systems with their thoughts and turn stars into weapons. But as her hand hovered over the document, she remembered the words her grandfather had whispered to her as a child. Sometimes, the most dangerous cage is the one with golden bars. The stylus clattered to the floor. No! The single word echoed through the vast chamber like a gunshot. The assembled aliens turned to each other in confusion, their various appendages clicking, whistling, and humming in disbelief. No species had ever refused the Galactic Peace Accord. No one was foolish enough to choose war over paradise. "I'm sorry," Sarah said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "But humanity declines your generous offer." What happened next would shake the foundations of galactic civilization and reveal a truth that the universe had forgotten. Sometimes, the greatest strength comes not from accepting what seems impossible to refuse, but from saying no when everyone expects you to say yes. This is the story of how one woman's refusal saved not just humanity, but the entire galaxy itself. The silence that followed Sarah's refusal stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. 17 different species stared at her with expressions ranging from confusion to outright disbelief. The Galactic Council Chamber, a magnificent structure carved from a single asteroid and suspended in the void between star systems, had never witnessed such an unprecedented moment. Sarah Chun maintained her composure despite the trembling in her hands. At 35, she had been chosen as Earth's ambassador not for her diplomatic experience, but for her ability to remain calm under pressure. A former crisis negotiator from the Chicago Police Department, she had talked down more hostage situations than anyone in the department's history. But nothing in her past had prepared her for this moment. The Zephyrian High Chancellor, a being that resembled a cross between an octopus and a tree, slowly extended one of his massive tentacle arms toward her. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of eons. "Ambassador Chun, perhaps you did not fully understand the terms of our agreement. Allow me to clarify." The chamber's holographic displays flickered to life, showing images of beautiful worlds where humans lived in harmony with nature. Cities that looked like works of art rose from pristine landscapes. Children played in gardens that stretched to the horizon, their laughter echoing across peaceful meadows. "Your species will be relocated to 12 carefully selected worlds," the Chancellor continued. "Each planet has been terraformed to match Earth's optimal conditions. Your people will want for nothing. Disease will be eradicated through our medical technology. Aging can be slowed to a crawl. Your children will live for centuries, watching civilizations rise and fall among the stars." A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. The crystalline collective, beings made of living diamond who communicated through light patterns, pulsed in harmonious approval. The void singers, ethereal creatures that existed partially in normal space and partially in another dimension, hummed their agreement in frequencies that made Sarah's bones vibrate. In return, added the representative from the hegemony of Claw, a massive reptilian being whose scales reflected the starlight streaming through the chamber's transparent walls. Humanity will simply agree to certain restrictions. No development of weapons beyond a certain threshold. No expansion beyond your assigned worlds without council approval. No interference in galactic politics. Sarah looked around the chamber, taking in the majesty of the assembled species. Each one represented millions of years of evolution, civilizations that had mastered technologies beyond human comprehension. The ethereal syndicate could manipulate matter at the quantum level. The Machine Confederacy had achieved perfect fusion of organic and artificial intelligence. The Cosmic Gardeners could grow entire ecosystems from a handful of seeds. "It sounds wonderful," Sarah said carefully. "But what happens if we refuse?" The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. The Chancellor's massive form shifted, and Sarah caught a glimpse of something ancient and terrible in his alien eyes. "There would be consequences," he said slowly. "The Void Reapers grow stronger each day. They have already consumed 17 star systems in the Outer Rim. Without the protection of the Galactic Alliance, Earth would be defenseless against their advance." The holographic displays changed, showing images that made Sarah's stomach churn. Worlds stripped bare of all life, their surfaces scarred and blackened. Entire solar systems where nothing remained but cold, dark planets orbiting dead stars. The Void Reapers were a force of pure destruction, entities from the spaces between galaxies that consumed everything they touched. "The choice is simple," continued the representative from the Psionic Dominion, a being whose thoughts Sarah could feel brushing against the edges of her mind like cold fingers. "Accept our protection and live in paradise, or face the Reapers alone and perish." Sarah closed her eyes and thought of Earth. She thought of her daughter playing in their backyard in Denver, chasing butterflies through the tall grass. She thought of her husband working late in his laboratory, trying to solve the puzzle of faster-than-light travel that had eluded human scientists for decades. She thought of the billions of people going about their daily lives, unaware that their entire future was being decided in this moment. When she opened her eyes, her resolve had crystallized into something unbreakable. "I understand the choice you're offering," she said, "but I need to ask you something. In all the worlds you've shown us, in all these paradise planets where humans would live under your protection, I noticed something missing." The council members exchanged glances, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, and psychic emanations. "What did you notice, Ambassador?" asked the Chancellor. "I didn't see any humans working alongside your species as equals. I didn't see human scientists collaborating on galactic projects. I didn't see human ships exploring new frontiers or human diplomats negotiating treaties." Sarah's voice grew stronger as she spoke. "What I saw were beautiful zoos where humans would live comfortable, safe, and completely powerless lives." A ripple of indignation passed through the chamber. The representative from the stellar monarchy, a being composed of living starlight, flared brighter in apparent offense. "You dare to compare our generous offer to imprisonment," it said, its voice like the crackling of solar flares. "Not imprisonment," Sarah replied. "Protection. There's a difference, but sometimes the end result is the same." She walked closer to the central platform where the peace treaty lay waiting. The document itself was a work of art, inscribed on crystallized time that showed different aspects of the agreement, depending on the angle from which it was viewed. "Tell me honestly," she said, addressing the entire assembly. "In 1,000 years, would humanity still have the right to say no to anything you decide is best for us?" The silence that followed her question was telling. Sarah could feel the weight of their consideration, the telepathic conversations happening at the speed of thought between species connected by psychic networks spanning entire galaxies. Finally, the Chancellor spoke. "The needs of galactic civilization sometimes require difficult decisions. Your species is young, impulsive. You have not yet learned the wisdom that comes with age. So that's a no," Sarah said quietly. "It is an acceptance of reality," replied the representative from the temporal conclave, a being that existed simultaneously in multiple time periods. Young species require guidance until they mature enough to make responsible decisions. Sarah nodded slowly, as if she finally understood. Then she picked up the signing stylus and held it poised over the document. The entire chamber held its collective breath. "I have one more question," she said. "What happened to the last species that refused your protection?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Sarah watched the reactions of the council members carefully, noting how several of them suddenly found other things to look at. "The Remnant Coalition was destroyed by the Void Reapers," the Chancellor said after a long pause. "They refused our offer of protection and paid the ultimate price." "How long ago was this?" "Approximately 50 years." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "And how long had the Void Reapers been active when you first contacted them?" "Ambassador, these questions are not relevant to your current situation. Humor me." The Chancellor's massive form shifted uncomfortably. "The Reapers have been active for approximately 200 years. So they have been successfully fighting the Reapers for a century and a half before you offered them protection. The Remnant were resourceful, but ultimately they lacked the wisdom to accept salvation when it was offered." Sarah set the stylus down without signing. "I think I understand now. The Remnant weren't destroyed by the Void Reapers, were they? They were destroyed because they refused to join your alliance." The accusation sent shockwaves through the chamber. Several species began speaking at once, their voices rising in denial and outrage. "The Remnant were warned," the Chancellor said, his voice carrying a note of finality. "They chose to stand alone. The Reapers consumed them because they had no allies to call upon." "Or perhaps," Sarah said, her training as a negotiator helping her read between the lines, "they were left to face the Reapers alone because the Galactic Alliance withdrew all support when they refused to submit." The silence that followed confirmed her suspicions. Sarah looked around the chamber one last time, taking in the faces of beings that could reshape reality with their thoughts, travel through time, and command the forces of creation itself. They were offering humanity paradise, and all it would cost was their freedom. "I'm going to make a counteroffer," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "Instead of accepting your protection, humanity chooses to stand as your allies. Not your wards, not your protected species, but your equals in the fight against the Void Reapers." The laughter that erupted from several council members was like the sound of breaking crystal and distant thunder. The idea that a species barely a century into spaceflight could stand as equals to civilizations millions of years old was apparently absurd. "Ambassador Chun," the Chancellor said, his voice heavy with what might have been pity, "your species has admirable courage, but courage without wisdom is simply another word for suicide. You have no weapons that can harm the Reapers. Your technology is primitive by galactic standards. Your lifespans are so short that you barely have time to learn before you die." "Maybe," Sarah said, "but we have something that I think you've forgotten in your millions of years of civilization." "And what is that?" Sarah smiled, thinking of humanity's long history of fighting impossible odds and, somehow, finding a way to win. "We have the ability to surprise ourselves." She turned and walked toward the chamber's exit, her footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. "Where are you going?" the Chancellor called after her. "Home," Sarah said without turning around. "To tell my people that we've been offered a choice between a golden cage and a chance to write our own story. I think I know which one they'll choose." As the chamber doors closed behind her, Sarah heard the council erupt into heated discussion. Some voices called for immediate action against Earth. Others urged patience. A few even suggested that perhaps the humans had a point. But Sarah didn't look back. She had a message to deliver to humanity, and she suspected that once they heard it, the galaxy would never be the same again. Behind her, the unsigned peace treaty lay on its crystalline table, a symbol of the road not taken. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, ancient forces stirred as word spread that a new player had entered the game, one that refused to follow the established rules. The war for humanity's future was about to begin, but it would not be the war anyone expected. Sarah's journey back to Earth took 3 days aboard the fastest human vessel available, a modified exploration ship called the Endeavour that could barely manage a tenth of the speed of the Council's slowest transport. During those 3 days, she rehearsed her speech 100 times, knowing that she would have to convince 8 billion people to choose almost certain death over guaranteed safety. The ship's captain, Maria Santos, found Sarah in the observation deck as they approached the Sol system. Earth hung before them like a blue marble against the black, beautiful and fragile, and completely unaware of what was coming. "Rough trip?" Maria asked, settling into the chair beside Sarah. "I just turned down paradise on behalf of our entire species," Sarah said quietly. "So yeah, you could say that." Maria was quiet for a long moment, watching the stars while slowly passed. "My grandmother used to tell me stories about the old days, before the Council made contact. She said people back then had this crazy idea that humans were meant to reach for the stars, not wait for them to be handed to us." "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman. She was a fighter pilot in the Martian Independence War. Died when I was 12 defending a mining colony from raiders." Maria's voice carried old pain mixed with pride. She used to say that the most important thing wasn't whether you won or lost, but whether you got to choose your own battles. Sarah nodded, understanding. The Martian Independence War had been humanity's last real conflict, ending just 2 years before first contact with the Galactic Council. It had been brutal and pointless, a corporate dispute over mining rights that had cost thousands of lives. But it had also been entirely human, fought for human reasons with human weapons by people who refused to back down from a fight they believed in. "Captain, can I ask you something? If you knew that accepting help meant never being allowed to make your own choices again, would you still take it?" Maria smiled grimly. "My grandmother had a saying for that, too. She said that help freely given makes you stronger, but help that comes with chains makes you a slave, even if the chains are made of gold." When they reached Earth, Sarah was surprised to find that news of her meeting with the Council had somehow preceded her. The media was in a frenzy, with analysts debating the implications of the Galactic Alliance's offer. Most seemed to view it as humanity's salvation, a chance to skip centuries of dangerous development and join a peaceful galactic community. Sarah's first stop was the United Nations headquarters in New York, where an emergency session had been called to hear her report. The assembly hall was packed with representatives from every nation on Earth, their faces showing a mixture of hope and fear. Secretary General Amara Okafor introduced Sarah to the assembly. "Ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador Chun will now present her report on humanity's first formal contact with the Galactic Alliance." Sarah took the podium and looked out at the assembled faces. These people represented every culture, every nation, every dream that humanity had ever had. In a few minutes, she would ask them to risk everything for a principle that couldn't be measured in lives saved or technologies gained. "Honorable delegates," she began, "I stand before you today to report that the Galactic Alliance has offered humanity a place among the stars. They promise us peace, prosperity, and protection from dangers we cannot even imagine. All we have to do is accept their guidance in all matters of importance and give up our right to make independent decisions about our own future." A murmur ran through the assembly. This wasn't what most had expected to hear. The Council showed me worlds where humans could live in perfect harmony with nature, cities that look like art galleries, technology that could extend our lives for centuries, medical advances that could eliminate disease and aging. It is, by any measure, an offer of paradise. "Then why?" called out the representative from the European Federation. "Do you sound like you're about to recommend we refuse it?" Sarah took a deep breath. "Because paradise is a beautiful place to visit, but it's a terrible place to live if you're not allowed to leave." She activated the holographic display and showed them the images the Council had shared with her. The gasps of wonder from the assembly were audible as they saw the magnificent worlds that could be humanity's home. "This is what they're offering us," she said, "and this is what we'd be giving up." The display changed to show images of Earth's history. The first humans leaving Africa to explore an unknown world. ships setting sail for distant shores, rockets launching toward the moon, the first colony ships departing from Mars. Every step of human progress has been taken by people who chose to risk everything for the chance to be free. We didn't stay safe in the caves because we knew the world was dangerous. We didn't remain in one valley because we knew other tribes might be hostile. We reached for the stars because that's what humans do. We reach. The representative from the African Union stood up. Ambassador Chun, with respect, you're talking about philosophical concepts while the Council is offering us practical solutions to real problems. They warned you about the Void Reapers, didn't they? What exactly are you proposing we do against enemies who could destroy star systems? Sarah nodded. That's exactly the right question. And the answer is, I don't know. But I know what I found out when I asked the Council about the Remnant Coalition. She told them about the species that had refused the Council's protection 50 years ago and how they had been left to face the Void Reapers alone after a century and a half of successfully fighting them. The Council doesn't just offer protection, she concluded. They require submission. And once you submit, you never get to stop submitting. The debate that followed was intense and passionate. Representatives argued about humanity's right to self-determination versus their responsibility to protect human lives. Some pointed out that Earth's military capabilities were laughable compared to galactic standards. Others argued that accepting the Council's offer would mean the end of human progress and exploration. Finally, Secretary General Okafor called for order. Ambassador Chun, what exactly are you recommending? I recommend that we politely decline the Council's offer and prepare to defend ourselves. Against enemies who can destroy solar systems? Against anyone who thinks humanity doesn't have the right to choose its own path. The vote, when it came, was closer than Sarah had expected. 47% voted to accept the Council's offer. 53% voted to refuse it. The margin was narrow enough that several representatives demanded a recount, but the result remained the same. Humanity had chosen freedom over safety. The real work began immediately. Sarah found herself at the center of a whirlwind of activity as Earth's greatest minds tried to figure out how to prepare for a war against enemies beyond their comprehension. Dr. James Park, Earth's leading theoretical physicist, summed up the challenge succinctly during their first strategy meeting. We're trying to figure out how to fight beings who treat the laws of physics like suggestions. Our most advanced weapons are chemical rockets and fusion bombs. They have technology that can manipulate matter at the quantum level and bend space-time like origami. Sarah sat in the conference room beneath the Pentagon, surrounded by military leaders, scientists, and strategists who were trying to solve an impossible problem. General Harrison Webb, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, had spread tactical displays across every available surface, but they all showed the same thing. Earth was completely outgunned. Maybe we're thinking about this wrong, Sarah said during a pause in the discussion. We're trying to figure out how to match their technology, but what if we don't need to? Dr. Park looked up from his calculations. What do you mean? The Council has millions of years of advanced technology, but they also have millions of years of thinking about problems the same way. They become so sophisticated that they might have forgotten how to be simple. Explain, said General Webb. Sarah stood and walked to the tactical display showing Earth's defenses. 3 orbital platforms, 47 orbital fighters, and a handful of missile batteries that could barely scratch the paint on a Council ship. During the Galactic War of Succession 3,000 years ago, she said, reciting information from the Council's historical databases, the Ethereal Syndicate defeated the Machine Confederacy by developing weapons that could phase through their energy shields. The Confederacy spent 2 centuries trying to adapt their shield technology to counter the new weapons. And, prompted Dr. Park, and they were eventually defeated by kinetic projectiles. Simple metal slugs fired at relativistic speeds. The Syndicate had become so focused on phasing through shields that they forgot to protect against basic physical impacts. Understanding began to dawn on the faces around the table. You're saying we should fight them with primitive weapons? General Webb asked. I'm saying we should fight them with unexpected weapons, Sarah corrected. The Council has spent millions of years perfecting defenses against energy weapons, quantum disruption, temporal manipulation, and psychic attacks. But when was the last time anyone in the galaxy had to worry about a nuclear-powered kinetic impactor traveling at 99% of light speed? Dr. Park's eyes lit up. We couldn't build enough of them to win a conventional war, but if we could get them close enough. Exactly. We don't need to match their firepower. We need to surprise them. Over the following weeks, the plan that emerged was audacious to the point of insanity. Earth's industrial capacity was redirected toward producing what the military called surprise packages. Simple, but devastating weapons that exploited gaps in Council technology that hadn't been relevant for millennia. The Javelin project developed kinetic kill vehicles that used basic chemical propulsion to accelerate to tremendous speeds. They couldn't maneuver like Council ships, but they didn't need to if they were fired from close enough range. The Pandora Initiative weaponized Earth's biological warfare research, creating viruses and bacteria that could potentially affect Council species' exotic biologies. It was a long shot, since most Council members had been genetically modified beyond recognition, but even a small chance of success was worth pursuing. Most ambitious of all was Project Prometheus, which attempted to reverse-engineer Council technology captured during their initial diplomatic visits. Dr. Park had a team of scientists in trying to understand alien physics well enough to turn it against its creators. But perhaps the most important development wasn't a weapon at all. It was a message. Sarah worked with the United Nations Communications Division to craft a broadcast that would go out to every inhabited world in the galaxy. It was humanity's declaration of independence, their announcement that Earth would not be anyone's protected species. People of the galaxy, the message began, we are the humans of Earth, and we speak to you as equals. We have been offered a place in your galactic civilization, but only as wards and children who must accept the wisdom of our elders. We respectfully decline this offer. We do not decline it because we think we are superior to you, or because we underestimate the dangers we face. We decline it because we believe that the right to make our own choices, even wrong choices, is more precious than any safety you can offer us. We know that our refusal may mean our destruction. We know that we are small and weak compared to the forces arrayed against us. But we also know that every species in this galaxy was once small and weak, and somehow you all found the strength to survive and grow and reach for the stars. If we must fall, we will fall as free beings who chose their own path. And if we somehow find a way to stand, we will stand ready to fight beside any who believe that freedom is worth the price it demands. The message was broadcast from every human colony, every orbital station, every ship in space. It reached the Centauri colonies, the mining platforms in the asteroid belt, and the research stations orbiting distant stars. Within hours, it was being retransmitted by alien receivers across the galaxy. The response was immediate and divided. Some Council species dismissed it as the foolish bravado of a primitive civilization. Others found themselves strangely moved by humanity's defiant stand. A few began to quietly question whether the Council's protection was as benevolent as they had always assumed. But the most important response came from an unexpected source. Deep in the archives of the Galactic Library, an ancient AI that had been dormant for 10,000 years suddenly awakened. It had been waiting for something, though its creators had died so long ago that their species was remembered only in myth. It had been waiting for someone to say no. The AI's message reached Earth 3 days later, transmitted through quantum channels that the Council couldn't intercept. It contained coordinates to a hidden facility in a system beyond the galaxy's outer rim, and a single line of text. The founders left tools for those brave enough to use them. Sarah stared at the message on her screen, her heart racing. The founders were creatures of legend, the first species to achieve galactic civilization before vanishing into mystery eons ago. If they had left something behind, something that could help humanity in the coming war, she picked up her secure communicator and placed a call to General Webb. General, I need you to prepare our fastest ship for a long-range mission. We're going treasure hunting. As Earth prepared for war, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were part of something larger than they understood. The galaxy was vast and old, filled with ancient secrets and forgotten powers. Maybe, just maybe, humanity's refusal to accept the status quo had awakened something that had been waiting for exactly the right moment to return. The war was coming, but perhaps humanity wouldn't have to fight it alone after all. The journey to the coordinates provided by the ancient AI took Sarah and her team beyond the edge of known space. The ship they traveled in, christened the Defiance, was humanity's fastest vessel, a modified exploration craft equipped with experimental engines that pushed the boundaries of human engineering. Even so, the trip took 2 weeks, carrying them further from Earth than any human had ever traveled. Captain Santos piloted the ship with steady hands, but Sarah could see the tension in her shoulders as they passed through regions of space that existed only as theoretical concepts on star charts. Dr. Park spent most of the journey hunched over his instruments, trying to make sense of readings that defied conventional physics. "The quantum flux patterns out here are impossible," he muttered for the dozenth time as they approached their destination. "Space itself is different somehow. More flexible." Their destination turned out to be a system that shouldn't have existed. 3 planets orbited a star that gave off no detectable radiation, their surfaces glowing with a soft light that seemed to come from within. The largest planet was covered in structures that stretched from surface to sky, architectural marvels that made humanity's greatest cities look like children's toys. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Commander Torres, the mission's tactical officer. "How old is this place?" The answer came as they approached the planet's surface. Their communication systems crackled to life with the same AI voice that had contacted Earth, but now it spoke with the weight of eons behind it. "Welcome, humans of Earth. I am the curator, last servant of the architects who built this sanctuary. I have waited 97,000 years for someone to find this place. You're not what I expected, but you're exactly what the galaxy needs." The landing bay that opened to receive their ship was large enough to hold a small city. As they disembarked, they found themselves in a vast chamber filled with technology that seemed to bend reality around it. Crystalline formations pulsed with inner light, and machines that defied description hummed with barely contained power. The curator appeared before them as a holographic projection, taking the form of a being that looked vaguely humanoid, but somehow ancient beyond measure. Its voice carried the weight of countless years spent in solitude. "The architects," it began without preamble, "were the first species to achieve what your council now seeks to control. They united the galaxy under a banner of peace and prosperity. But they made a critical error. They forgot that evolution requires struggle, that growth demands challenge." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. What happened to them? They succeeded too well. Under their protection, species after species lost the ability to adapt, to innovate, to surprise even themselves. The galaxy became stagnant, perfect, and utterly vulnerable when the first Void Reapers arrived from the spaces between galaxies. The chamber around them shifted, and suddenly, they were surrounded by holographic displays showing the ancient war. They watched in awe and horror as civilizations that spanned entire star clusters fell one by one to entities of pure entropy and destruction. The architects realized their mistake too late. The curator continued. Their protected species had become so dependent on guidance that they couldn't adapt fast enough to counter an enemy that defied all conventional understanding. In the end, only chaos could defeat chaos. "The Remnant Coalition," Sarah said, understanding beginning to dawn. "The last free species in the galaxy. The only one still capable of thinking in new ways, of adapting and evolving under pressure. The architects threw everything they had into protecting them, giving them weapons and knowledge while keeping their existence secret from the Reapers." Dr. Park stepped forward, his scientific curiosity overcoming his caution. "But the Remnant were destroyed 50 years ago. We were told the Reapers killed them." The curator's expression grew sad. The remnant sacrificed themselves to drive the Reapers back into the void between galaxies. But before they did, they succeeded in their final mission. They planted seeds. Seeds? Sarah asked. New species, young and wild and still capable of growth. Species that hadn't yet been tamed by the Council's protection. The remnant identified 17 such species across the galaxy and took steps to ensure they would develop the strength to fight when the time came. And humanity was one of these species. Humanity was the most promising of them all. The remnant watched as you fought impossible wars and, somehow, found ways to win. They saw you reach for the stars despite having barely discovered fire in galactic terms. They believed that when the time came, humans would choose freedom over safety. Sarah felt the weight of cosmic history settling on her shoulders. The Council doesn't know about this, do they? The current Council is composed entirely of species that accepted architect protection and later transferred that dependence to the Alliance. They genuinely believe they are offering salvation. They have no memory of what they lost when they gave up the right to surprise themselves. The curator led them deeper into the facility, past chambers filled with technologies that hurt to look at directly, and archives containing the knowledge of civilizations that had ruled the stars when Earth was still a ball of cooling rock. The architects left tools here for the day when the Reapers would return, it explained. Weapons that could fight entropy itself. Knowledge that could turn chaos against chaos. But they also left a warning. They stopped before a massive crystalline formation that pulsed with dark energy. Sarah could feel it pulling at something deep inside her mind, offering power beyond imagination. These weapons can defeat the Void Reapers, the curator said, but they come with a price. The knowledge required to use them will change whoever wields them. The architects themselves were transformed by their own weapons, becoming something more than their original species, but also something less. They chose to fade away rather than rule as gods over their protected children. What kind of transformation? Dr. Park asked, though his voice suggested he already suspected the answer. The wielder would gain the ability to manipulate fundamental forces, to bend space and time, to touch the quantum foundations of reality. They would become capable of standing against the Reapers as an equal, but they would also become something that could never again live among normal beings. Sarah stared at the crystalline weapon, understanding the terrible choice it represented. To save humanity, one human would have to stop being human. There's another option, she said quietly. You said the remnant planted seeds. 17 species that might be ready to fight. What if we could unite them? The curator's ancient eyes brightened. The 17 Coalition. Yes, the remnant's final strategy. If all 17 species could be brought together, their combined diversity might be enough to counter the Reapers without requiring individual transformation. But the Council has spent 50 years making sure these species remain isolated from each other. Then, we'll have to change that. Over the following days, Sarah and her team learned everything they could about the other 16 species. Each had been identified by the remnant for specific qualities that made them valuable allies in the fight against entropy. The Karath were a warrior species that had never accepted Council protection, preferring to fight their own battles regardless of the cost. They had developed weapons and tactics that emphasized adaptability over raw power. The Veltar were nomadic traders who had maintained independence by constantly moving between star systems, never staying in one place long enough for the Council to establish permanent oversight. Their ships were marvels of improvised engineering. The Jinn were energy beings who existed in a state of constant flux, their very nature making them immune to the Reaper's entropy weapons. They had spent centuries hiding in the coronas of stars, avoiding Council detection. Each species had its own story of resistance, its own reason for refusing the comfortable cage of Council protection. Some had done so openly, accepting the risks that came with independence. Others had pretended to accept while secretly maintaining their freedom to act. The challenge, Dr. Park observed as they reviewed the intelligence, will be convincing them to work together. Some of these species have been enemies for centuries. Then, We'll have to give them a bigger enemy to worry about, Sarah replied. The plan they developed was audacious even by human standards. Instead of trying to contact each species individually, they would broadcast a message to all of them simultaneously, using the ancient communication network that the architects had hidden throughout the galaxy. The message would reveal the truth about the Void Reaper's return, the Council's inability to stop them, and humanity's proposal for a new kind of alliance. But as they prepared to send the message, the curator delivered troubling news. The Reapers have begun their return, it announced. My sensors detect disturbances in the void between galaxies. They will reach the outer rim worlds within 2 of your years. Sarah felt her heart sink. 2 years to unite 17 species that barely knew each other existed, convince them to work together despite centuries of mistrust, and prepare for a war against enemies that had destroyed the greatest civilization in galactic history. We need to move faster, she said. There is a way, the curator replied hesitantly. The architects left one more gift, a communication array that could reach all 17 species instantly. But using it would reveal the location of this facility to anyone monitoring galactic communications, including the Council and the Reapers, if they're close enough to intercept the signal. Sarah looked around at her team. Captain Santos gave her a grim nod. Dr. Park was already running calculations on his tablet. Lieutenant Commander Torres simply shrugged, as if to say that they'd already committed to the impossible. Do it, Sarah decided. Send the message. The communication array came to life with power that made the air itself hum with energy. Sarah stood before the transmitter, knowing that her next words would either unite the galaxy's last free species or doom them all. To the Karath warriors who choose honor over comfort, to the Veltar nomads who choose motion over stagnation, to all who have chosen freedom over safety, I am Sarachan of Earth, and I speak for humanity. The Void Reapers are returning. The Council cannot stop them, but together we might find a way. We know the truth about the Remnant Coalition, about the seeds they planted, about the choice that faces us all. Join us, and let us write a new chapter in galactic history. Let us show the universe that chaos can be fought with chaos, that diversity is stronger than unity, and that sometimes the youngest voices carry the oldest wisdom. This is our invitation to you. Come to Earth. Come as you are, with your weapons, and your wisdom, and your wonderful, terrible independence. Come, and let us face the darkness together. The message went out across the galaxy, carried by quantum channels that bypassed normal space entirely. Within hours, responses began to arrive. Some were refusals, species too afraid or too isolated to risk open rebellion against the status quo. But others, Karath High Command acknowledges your message, came the first positive response. We have waited long for worthy foes. If these Reapers are as dangerous as you claim, we will be there. The Veltar Wanderer fleets are intrigued, came another. It has been too long since we had a destination worth reaching. One by one, the responses came in. Not all 17 species agreed to come, but enough did to give Sarah hope. As the Defiants prepared to return to Earth with their impossible news, she stood in the observation deck watching the ancient planet fade behind them. Think it'll work? Captain Santos asked. Sarah thought about the weapon she had refused to take, the power she could have claimed that would have transformed her into something capable of fighting gods. Instead, she had chosen to trust in the strength that came from many different voices working together. I don't know, she said honestly, but for the first time since this all started, I think we might actually have a chance. Behind them, the curator's facility went dark, its purpose fulfilled after 97,000 years of waiting. Ahead of them lay Earth, humanity, and the beginning of the strangest alliance in galactic history. The 17 Coalition was about to be born, and with it the last hope for a galaxy that had forgotten how to fight for itself. The arrival of the first alien fleet in Earth's solar system caused panic across every human colony. The Karath ships were massive, bristling with weapons that could crack planets, and they moved with the deadly grace of apex predators. News broadcasts showed worried anchors trying to explain to civilian populations why what looked like an invasion fleet was actually humanity's salvation. Sarah watched the ships take up positions around Mars from the observation deck of Luna Station, where humanity's hastily assembled diplomatic corps was preparing for the most important meeting in the species' history. The Karath had requested a neutral location for the gathering, and Luna's low gravity was apparently acceptable to most of the alien physiologies that would be attending. 14 species have confirmed arrival within the next 72 hours, reported Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had been appointed as Earth's Xenospecies coordinator. 3 more are still in transit. The logistics are challenging. That was an understatement. Each species had different atmospheric, gravitational, and environmental requirements. The Jinn existed as pure energy and needed special containment fields just to communicate with physical beings. The Veltar refused to enter any enclosed space, requiring their representatives to attend via remote hologram. The Karath delegation had to be housed in reinforced structures because their home gravity was 3 times Earth normal. But perhaps the biggest challenge was cultural. These species had been isolated from each other for centuries, some by choice, others by circumstance. Ancient grudges and misunderstandings threatened to derail the alliance before it even began. The first major crisis came when the HFY arrived. Their ships were beautiful crystalline structures that sang as they moved through space, but their species practiced ritualistic cannibalism as a form of honor. The Koroth immediately issued challenges to personal combat, considering the HFY's greeting songs to be declarations of war. Sarah found herself in the middle of what might have been the galaxy's first 3-way diplomatic incident. Tried to explain to 2 species of apex predators that their traditional greetings were incompatible with productive negotiations. "Honored warriors," she said, addressing the Koroth delegation leader, a massive being whose scarred hide told the story of 1,000 battles. The HFY songs are not challenges, but expressions of joy at meeting new potential allies. Joy sounds suspiciously like bloodlust in their language, growled War Master Kron. If they wish to sing a battle, we are happy to provide them with a song worth singing. On the other side of the conference room, the HFY delegation leader, a graceful being whose crystalline exoskeleton refracted light into beautiful patterns, chimed in harmonious disagreement. The harmonics clearly indicate celebration, not aggression. If the fur beasts cannot distinguish between music and warfare, perhaps they lack the sophistication for meaningful alliance. Dr. Park, who had been studying xenolinguistics frantically for the past month, leaned over to Sarah. "I think there's a translation issue. The HFY use the same tonal patterns for honored meeting and glorious death in battle. The Karath are hearing the second meaning." Sarah sighed. This was going to be a long week. By the 3rd day, they had managed to establish basic communication protocols and seating arrangements that wouldn't result in immediate bloodshed. The real work began when Captain Torres presented the intelligence they had gathered about the Void Reapers. Analysis of historical records indicates that the Reapers operate as a hive-mind entity, she explained, her words being simultaneously translated into 17 different languages and communication methods. They consume matter, energy, and information, converting everything they touch into more of themselves. Previous attempts to fight them with conventional weapons have failed because they adapt to any consistent strategy within hours. The assembled delegates absorbed this information with varying degrees of concern. Some species had faced the Reapers before during their initial incursion millennia ago. Others knew them only from legends. "How many ships do they have?" asked the representative from the Void Swimmers, a species that lived in the spaces between stars and communicated through gravitational waves. "Our best estimates suggest approximately 10,000 vessels of various sizes," Torres replied. "But that number is meaningless because they can convert any matter they encounter into new ships. The real threat is their ability to learn and adapt." A new voice entered the discussion, carried by quantum fields that made the air itself vibrate. The quantum echoes were beings of pure thought that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and their words carried the weight of certainty. Adaptation requires pattern recognition. Chaos disrupts patterns. The humans propose fighting entropy with entropy. This has mathematical validity. Sarah stood up, knowing that this was her moment to either unite these disparate species or watch the alliance fall apart before it truly began. Every species in this room has survived because they refused to follow someone else's plan for their future, she said. The Karath fight because honor demands it. The Fexai sing because beauty must be preserved. The Veltar wander because freedom requires motion. Each of you has something the Reapers have never encountered before. She activated the holographic display, showing tactical simulations that Dr. Park had spent weeks preparing. The Galactic Council fights the Reapers the same way they've fought every enemy for millions of years, with overwhelming force applied through predictable strategies. They lose because the Reapers learn their patterns and counter them. We propose something different. Instead of one unified strategy, we use 17 different ones simultaneously. The Karath engage them in direct combat, while the Jinn disrupt their energy matrices. The Veltar hit their supply lines, while the quantum echoes confuse their navigation. Every time they adapt to one approach, 12 others change tactics. War Master Kron leaned forward, his predator's instincts engaged. You propose to fight chaos with chaos. This could work if each species maintains operational independence. Exactly. No central command, no unified strategy that can be predicted and countered. Each fleet acts according to their own nature and expertise, coordinating just enough to avoid hitting each other. The discussion that followed was intense and sometimes heated, but gradually a consensus began to emerge. The plan was insane, but it was insane in exactly the way that might work against an enemy that had never faced true unpredictability. On the fourth day, they received word that changed everything. The Galactic Council's fastest courier ships had reached Earth, carrying an ultimatum from the Alliance. Sarah read the message aloud to the assembled delegates, to the humans of Earth and any species that have joined their rebellion. You are in violation of Galactic Peace Accord Section 47, which prohibits the formation of military alliances without Council approval. You have 72 hours to disperse this gathering and report to Council space for judgment. Failure to comply will result in enforcement action. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, the Fexai delegate spoke, her crystalline voice ringing like distant bells. They threaten us with enforcement, while entropy itself approaches the galaxy's edge. Do they not understand what comes? The Council has convinced itself that the Reapers can be contained, Sarah replied. They believe their current defensive strategies will hold long enough for them to find a conventional solution. And if they are wrong? Asked the Veltar representative, his image flickering slightly through the holographic projection. Then everyone dies, including them. War Master Kron stood up, his massive frame dominating the room. The Karath do not surrender to threats. If the Council wishes to enforce their will upon us, they are welcome to try. One by one, the other delegates added their voices to his. The Jinn crackled with energy that tasted of defiance. The quantum echoes resonated with determination across multiple dimensional frequencies. Even the peaceful Gardner Collective, who normally avoided all conflict, declared their intention to stand with the coalition. But the real test came that afternoon, when the Council's enforcement fleet arrived. 12 massive ships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, each one larger than a human city and bristling with weapons that could sterilize entire planets. They were led by the Judgment of Truth, flagship of the Ethereal Syndicate, and one of the most powerful vessels in the galaxy. The communication that came from the fleet was transmitted on all frequencies simultaneously, ensuring that every ship in the system would hear it clearly. This is Fleet Admiral Zinthera of the Galactic Council Enforcement Division. By the authority vested in me by the Alliance Treaty, I order the immediate dispersal of all unauthorized military forces. You have 1 hour to comply before we begin enforcement actions. Sarah looked around the emergency session that had been called aboard Luna Station. The representatives of 14 species stared back at her, waiting to see how humanity would respond to this test of their resolve. "Admirals," she said, addressing the fleet commanders who had gathered in the station's main conference room, "I need to know something. If we fight the Council fleet, can we win?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. These were warriors from species that had survived by their strength and cunning, but they were facing an enemy with technology that surpassed their own by orders of magnitude. In a conventional battle? No, admitted Commander Thekvar of the Veltar raiding fleet. But this would not be a conventional battle. Explain. The Council expects us to fight like civilized beings, following the established rules of galactic warfare. They will attempt to disable our ships without destroying them, hoping to capture us for judgment. They have no experience fighting enemies who refuse to follow the rules. Sarah felt a slow smile spreading across her face. "You're suggesting we fight dirty. I'm suggesting we fight like the desperate, independent, chaotic species we are instead of pretending to be the honorable galactic citizens the Council expects us to be." The battle plan that emerged over the next hour was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Instead of forming a traditional battle line, the Coalition fleets would scatter across the solar system, using hit-and-run tactics to force the Council forces to divide their attention. The humans would provide intelligence and coordination while the alien fleets provided the combat power. Most importantly, they would not fight to win. They would fight to send a message. When the hour expired, Fleet Admiral Zinthera received an unexpected response to his ultimatum. Instead of surrender or defiance, he received an open broadcast that was transmitted not just to his fleet, but to every inhabited world in the galaxy. To the peoples of the Galactic Alliance, Sarah's voice carried clearly across the void. "Today, your Council demands that free species submit to judgment for the crime of choosing their own allies. They do this while an enemy that threatens all life in the galaxy gathers strength at the galaxy's edge. We do not want war with the Council. We want to save the galaxy from the Void Reapers. But if the Council insists on fighting us instead of the true enemy, then we will show them what independent species are capable of when their freedom is threatened." Today's battle is not about victory or defeat. It is about demonstrating that the age of unquestioned authority is ending. Today, we fight not just for ourselves, but for the right of all species to choose their own destiny. The battle that followed was brief, chaotic, and utterly unprecedented. The Coalition fleet struck from 17 different directions using tactics that the Council's tactical computers couldn't predict or counter. Koroth ships rammed Council vessels with berserker fury. Veltar raiders appeared from behind asteroids to deliver pinpoint strikes before vanishing again. The Jinn overloaded Council energy shields with pure electromagnetic chaos. The humans contributed their own surprise, a swarm of kinetic kill vehicles that had been hidden throughout the asteroid belt. Simple, unsophisticated, and completely unexpected, they punched through Council shields that had been designed to stop much more advanced weapons. When the smoke cleared, the Judgment of Truth was crippled, and 3 other Council ships had been disabled. The Coalition had lost several vessels as well, but they had achieved something more important than military victory. They had proven that the Council could be fought. Admiral Zinthera's final communication was transmitted with barely controlled fury. "You have made your choice. The Council will not forget this act of rebellion." As the battered Council fleet retreated to hyperspace, Sarah stood on Luna Station's observation deck, watching the Coalition ships regroup. In the distance, Earth hung like a blue jewel, beautiful and defiant and free. "Think they'll be back?" asked Captain Santos, joining her at the window. "Oh, they'll be back," Sarah replied, "but not as quickly as the Reapers." The news of the battle spread across the galaxy within hours. On some worlds, it was received with horror at the breakdown of galactic order. On others, it sparked hope that the age of force protection might finally be ending. But in the dark spaces between galaxies, ancient entities felt the disturbance and quickened their approach. The Void Reapers had been patient for millennia, waiting for the galaxy to grow complacent and weak. Now, they sensed opportunity in the chaos. The real war was about to begin, and this time, both sides would fight for the soul of galactic civilization itself. The Void Reapers arrived 6 months earlier than predicted, emerging from the spaces between galaxies like a tide of living darkness. They came not as a fleet, but as a phenomenon, reality itself seeming to fray at the edges where their presence touched normal space. Sarah stood in the command center of Bastion Station, humanity's hastily constructed forward base in the Outer Rim territories. Around her, holographic displays showed the impossible scope of the threat they faced. The Reapers had already consumed 3-star systems on the galactic edge, converting entire worlds into more of themselves with a efficiency that defied comprehension. Initial contact reports are consistent across all observation posts, reported Dr. Park, his voice strained from weeks of analyzing data that hurt to think about. The Reapers aren't just destroying matter, they're unmaking it, converting organized energy and matter into pure entropy, then rebuilding it into their own structures. Commander Torres studied the tactical displays with the grim expression of a soldier facing impossible odds. Our best estimates give them 4 months to reach the core worlds if they maintain their current rate of advance. The Council's defensive lines are slowing them down, but not stopping them. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. The Galactic Council, which had declared the coalition a threat to galactic peace just months earlier, was now fighting desperately to hold back an enemy that threatened to end all life in the galaxy. Their conventional strategies, massive defensive formations, overwhelming firepower, predictable tactics, were proving exactly as useless as the Curator had predicted. "What's the status of the coalition fleets?" Sarah asked. "Scattered across 16 different systems, harassing the Reaper advance forces just as we planned," replied War Master Kron via quantum communication link. His image flickered with interference caused by the reality distortions around Reaper ships. "The enemy adapts quickly, but not quickly enough to counter 17 different tactical approaches simultaneously." That was the one piece of good news. The Coalition's chaotic strategy was working exactly as intended, keeping the Reapers off balance and preventing them from developing effective counters to the diverse array of tactics being used against them. But harassment wasn't victory, and everyone knew that the Coalition couldn't keep up their hit-and-run attacks indefinitely. "There's been a development," Sarah announced to the assembled commanders. "The Council has sent a diplomatic envoy requesting a ceasefire and emergency negotiations." The reaction was immediate and mixed. Several alien voices spoke at once in languages that the translation system struggled to interpret. The general tone was clear enough. Half the Coalition wanted to reject the Council's overture outright, while the other half saw it as an opportunity to finally unite against the common threat. "What are their terms?" asked the representative from the Quantum Echoes, their voice resonating across multiple dimensional frequencies. "They're proposing a temporary alliance," Sarah replied. "Full amnesty for coalition actions in exchange for unified command structure under Council authority. They're offering to share advanced technology and strategic intelligence." War Master Kron's scarred face twisted into what might have been a smile. "They offer us the same chains they've always offered, just with different decorations." The answer remains no. "With respect, War Master," interjected the Thex High Delegate, "the situation has changed. The Reapers threaten all life in the galaxy. Perhaps temporary submission is preferable to permanent extinction." The debate that followed was fierce and passionate, touching on fundamental questions of freedom, survival, and the price both demanded. As Sarah listened to the arguments, she found herself thinking about the weapon she had seen in the Curator's facility, the power that could transform her into something capable of fighting entropy itself. The discussion was interrupted by an urgent communication from the outer perimeter. Captain Santos's voice crackled through the quantum link, distorted by emergency encryption. "Command, this is Perimeter Scout 7. We've got massive Reaper formation approaching the Kepler system. 300 vessels and growing. They're not following their previous pattern. They're heading straight for the Coalition staging area. Sarah felt ice form in her stomach. The Kepler system housed the largest concentration of Coalition forces, including refugee fleets from 6 different species whose homeworlds had already fallen to the Reapers. How did they know? Dr. Park demanded. The answer came from an unexpected source. The Chamber's communications system activated without authorization, and a voice that sounded like the death of stars spoke in words that bypassed language entirely, implanting meaning directly into their minds. We know because we have always known. We are entropy. We are the end of all patterns, all order, all pretense of meaning. Your chaos amuses us, but chaos is still order of a kind. We will unmake it as we unmake all things. The presence vanished, leaving behind a silence that felt like the death of hope. They've been studying us, Sarah said quietly, learning from every engagement, every tactic, every strategy. We bought time, but we didn't buy victory. Then what do we do? Asked Commander Torres. Sarah looked around the room at the assembled representatives of the last free species in the galaxy. Each face showed the same desperate resolve that had brought them together in the first place. They had chosen this path knowing it might lead to their destruction, but they had chosen it freely. We do what we've always done, she said. We surprise ourselves. The plan that emerged over the next 12 hours was the most audacious gamble in galactic history. Instead of fleeing the approaching Reaper fleet or trying to fight them conventionally, the Coalition would do something that no species had ever attempted. They would go directly to the source. The curator had provided coordinates for 17 Reaper command nodes, massive structures hidden in the void between galaxies where the entities maintained their collective consciousness. If those nodes could be destroyed, the individual Reaper ships would lose their coordination and become vulnerable to conventional attack. The mission is essentially suicide, Sarah explained to the assembled volunteers. The void between galaxies is hostile to normal matter. The command nodes are protected by reality distortions that can unmake ships just by proximity. And we have no idea what defenses the Reapers have prepared. But if it works, added Dr. Park, we could end this war in a single strike instead of fighting a losing battle of attrition for the next 100 years. 17 ships volunteered for the mission, 1 from each Coalition species. They were the fastest, most advanced vessels each race could provide, modified with every defensive technology the Coalition had been able to develop or steal. More importantly, each ship carried a fragment of the ancient weapon technology that the curator had provided, devices that could theoretically unmake the Reaper command nodes if they could get close enough to use them. Sarah found herself assigned to the human vessel, a heavily modified explorer ship renamed the Last Hope. The irony of the name wasn't lost on her. If this mission failed, it truly would be the galaxy's last hope. As the 17 ships prepared to depart, Sarah received one final communication from Earth. Her husband's voice reached her across the light years, carrying love and fear in equal measure. Sarah, whatever you're about to do, I want you to know that we understand why you're doing it. Maya asked me to tell you that she's proud her mommy is helping to save the galaxy. Come home to us. Sarah closed her eyes, memorizing the sound of his voice. She had volunteered for this mission knowing that she would likely never see her family again, but hearing their voices made the sacrifice real in a way that abstract duty never could. The journey to the void between galaxies took 3 days, traveling through regions of space where the laws of physics became increasingly unreliable. Stars were few and far between, existing as isolated points of light in an ocean of absolute darkness. The ships maintained communication through quantum links, but even those began to fail as they moved further from normal spacetime. They found the first command node exactly where the curator's coordinates indicated it would be, a structure the size of a small moon, made of crystallized entropy that hurt to look at directly. It hung in the void like a cancer in reality itself, surrounded by lesser Reaper ships that moved in perfect coordination. Beginning attack run, reported the Karath captain over the increasingly unstable communication link. For honor and freedom, The battle that followed defied description. The coalition ships struck from 17 different angles using weapons and tactics that the Reapers had never encountered. Energy beings phased through solid matter to deliver devastating attacks from within. Quantum manipulators folded space to bring distant weapons to bear at point-blank range. Reality itself became a battlefield as order and entropy clashed at the fundamental level. One by one, the command nodes fell. The ancient weapons proved capable of unmaking even Reaper structures, turning crystallized entropy back into random probability and dispersing it into the void. But the cost was terrible. Ship after ship was lost as they pushed deeper into the Reaper stronghold, their crews sacrificing themselves to ensure the mission's success. When the last hope reached the final command node, Sarah found herself alone. The other 16 ships had either been destroyed or damaged beyond repair, their crews dead or dying in the hostile void between galaxies. The massive Reaper structure loomed before her, protected by reality distortions that made her ship's hull scream with stress. Sarah activated the final ancient weapon, feeling its power course through the ship's systems. She could feel it trying to touch her mind, offering her the transformation that would make her capable of wielding forces beyond mortal comprehension. All she had to do was accept the change, and she could become something powerful enough to destroy every Reaper in existence. But she remembered the curator's warning about what such power would cost. She would save the galaxy, but she would lose everything that made her human in the process. Instead, she made a different choice. Sarah programmed the weapon to fire automatically, then set the last hope on a collision course with the command node. As the ship accelerated toward the Reaper structure, she activated the quantum communicator and broadcast one final message to the galaxy. To everyone listening, human, alien, council member, coalition fighter. This is Sarah Chun, reporting the successful completion of Operation Last Hope. The Reaper command structure has been neutralized. Individual ships should become vulnerable to conventional attack within hours. I want you all to remember something. We didn't win this war because we were the strongest or the most advanced. We won because we refused to accept that anyone else had the right to make our choices for us. Freedom isn't something you can give to someone. It's something they have to choose for themselves. The galaxy has a chance now to build something better than what came before. Don't waste it by falling back into the same patterns that led to this crisis. Learn, grow, change, and never stop choosing your own path among the stars. The last hope struck the command node at 90% of light speed, and the ancient weapon detonated in the same instant. The explosion that followed unmade the entire structure, converting organized entropy back into random possibility and dispersing it across the void. Across the galaxy, Reaper ships suddenly stopped moving in perfect coordination. Their hive minds severed, they became individual entities vulnerable to the combined fleets of Council and Coalition forces. The war that had threatened to end all life in the galaxy was over in a matter of hours. Sarah's sacrifice had saved not just humanity, but every living thing in the galaxy. 6 months later, representatives from across galactic civilization gathered on Earth to sign the New Covenant, a treaty that restructured galactic society around principles of voluntary association rather than protective authority. Species could choose to join larger alliances, but they also retained the absolute right to leave and govern themselves. The memorial service for the heroes of Operation Last Hope was held in Earth's orbit, with ships from hundreds of species forming a massive formation around the small blue world that had started the rebellion. As her husband and daughter watched from the observation deck of Luna Station, Captain Santos read the final entry from Sarah's personal log. I used to think that the most important choice was between safety and freedom, but I've learned that the real choice is between accepting what seems inevitable and having the courage to surprise yourself. Humans have always been good at surprising themselves. I hope we never lose that ability. The galaxy had been saved, but more importantly, it had been freed. And in systems across the spiral arms, young species looked up at the stars, and dreamed of choosing their own paths among them, just as humanity had done when one diplomat decided to say no to paradise and yes to possibility. The age of force protection was over. The age of chosen freedom had begun. And somewhere in the void between galaxies, ancient powers that had slept for eons began to stir, drawn by the unprecedented act of a species that had refused to trade its soul for survival. The universe was vast and full of wonders yet undiscovered, and humanity had earned the right to seek them out on their own terms. The story of Earth's rebellion was over, but the story of humanity's journey among the stars was just beginning.